Last Sunday, of course, was Easter, and we celebrated the fact that the tomb was empty, and Jesus was standing in his physical body and greeted Mary Magdalene, who had come early to the sepulcher to meet him. And then we kind of closed down. Easter's done. Jesus died bravely. He was resurrected, finished for another year. But the Bible itself is actually very interesting because Jesus intermittently appeared to his disciples consistently for 40 days after that. So whereas we celebrate it as this one magnificent moment, in fact, it wasn't at all. It went on for more than a month and a half, even the very day that he was crucified. Two disciples or the day after, two disciples are walking and they're joined by a stranger, and they're talking about the events, and the stranger says, "Oh, did something interesting happen?" And they said, "You must be the only man in all of Israel who doesn't know about this." And so they told him the whole story, and he was quite interested. Picture it. They're explaining to him all this that happened, and then they like this guy, so they invite him to come to dinner. And they're sitting down and having dinner, and this stranger reaches over, takes a piece of bread and breaks it. And this is, of course, the gesture from the Last Supper. And then all of a sudden, the disciples realize that this man that they didn't recognize is actually Jesus. I mean, how many layers of teaching, of experience, of confusion, just countless things. And then I believe he disappeared at that point, if I have my story correctly. Somebody who might know differently can correct me afterwards. Please don't correct me now. But it was dramatic. And then just every so often, they would be somewhere. And even on Easter night, as it's described, all the disciples were very, very scared, because this experience that their guru had, I mean, we can talk about it bravely now because it's very far away. But for them, it wasn't far away at all. It was right there. They had come into the city in glory and hallelujah, hosanna, praise the Lord. They knew with all their hearts that this man who was with them had the power of the divine in him. If they had all the philosophy straight or not, it didn't really matter. They knew in their hearts what they had in him, and they assumed he was going to declare himself. And instead, it's not merely that he died, but he was humiliated, he was tortured, all of these, nothing that any of us would look forward to. And they recognized that the same could happen to him. So it's described that they are in a locked room. They have locked themselves into a room because they don't know if at any moment an armed cohort is going to come. And Mary Magdalene has claimed to have seen him, but she was always a little over the top. And so maybe she did, maybe she didn't. How would you know? And then all of a sudden, again, he manifests himself. He manifests, and they always make the little detail, the room was locked, so that he couldn't have snuck in the door when no one was looking. You have to make sure of all of this. But he manifested himself. Peace, he said, meaning, do not be afraid. Do not be concerned. Do not believe the delusion. I'm here. I'm here as I've always been. Like this. Now, none of us had the opportunity to meet Jesus, not in this incarnation. I think many of us may have been there, on the streets at least. If maybe we had the courage to follow him, maybe we were close disciples. But inasmuch as it's all part of the same divine story, it's not at all unusual to think that we were also there. I certainly had the privilege of traveling to Jerusalem a number of times a few years ago. And walking on those streets, it did not seem like a foreign land. Nothing about it seemed like it was unknown. Is it the vibration that we recognize? Is it the man? I really don't know. But none of us had the opportunity to meet Jesus, and yet we all have this deep feeling of the reality of this story, and the reality of his consciousness, and the potential of that consciousness to touch us. And interestingly, as it happened this year, Swami Kriyananda's Moksha Day, we call it, his liberation day when he left his body, was the day after Easter. It's, for us, it's April 21st, wherever it comes. Easter skirts around, goes on a different calendar. But they came right next to each other. And my own spiritual life has been entirely defined by Swami Kriyananda. And I was born at such a time that I met him at a young age and had more than 40 years of close association with him. And all during the time that he was living with us, I was a spokesperson for him. It was I was a bit of a translator, is how I realized that. Oddly enough, at one point, Swami Kriyananda was invited to be a keynote speaker at a conference that was given by Swami Rama, I think his name, but now oddly I can't remember, the Himalayan Institute. As it happened, Swami got ill and he couldn't go. Jyotish wasn't available, so they had to take the third string at that point, which was me. And I had to go, and they expected Swami Kriyananda, and they had me. Let's just say, it could have gone better. But it was very interesting to me because I heard Swami Rama speak and he explained something or another, and I found myself standing up there the next day and explaining to everyone what Swami Rama meant. It's like to translate is sort of like, that's always been my job. So even when Swami was living, I was always translating. I was always explaining to people the implications of what he'd done or why he did it, because he wanted me to write about him, which I have done now in 2 books, and I am working on a 3rd. So it is my job to talk like that. And because everything I understand about the spiritual path came from him, it's very interesting. This is an important part of it. When Swamiji, his entire self-definition, Swami Kriyananda's entire self-definition was that he was a disciple of Yogananda. He never accepted any other definition. It didn't matter how people praised him or what they called him or how many songs he wrote or anything at all. I was watching recently when Swami went to visit the Seattle community in 2003. There's a film of it I was looking at, and Padma and Hriman, who are the leaders of that community, were introducing a beautiful introduction for Swami, and the choir was going to sing, and Padma says, Swami has written, the choir's here, they're going to sing, Swami has written 400 pieces of music. And then she sort of feels something in the audience. We're not going to sing all of them. He said like that. We're just going to sing 3. Okay. But you could say a lot without using a single adjective that would be very impressive just for the sheer magnitude of the work that he did in the world. And at a certain point, it was 1990, Swami wrote the book called Essence of Self-Realization, which is, he took, the whole book is Master's words, all the things that Swami heard him say. And in fact, when he wrote that book, it was very interesting. There was a big storm, and the electricity went out. And so he didn't have access to his computer, but his notes were paper notes from when he'd lived with Master. And so he was writing the book by hand. And he said it was actually better because sometimes when you're writing by computer, you go fast. And he was a very fast typist, and you could just go fast. But when he was writing by hand, he had to, feel and concentrate on every word. And sometimes he didn't have quite enough, because that book is by subjects, by topics. Sometimes he didn't have quite enough on a topic. And he would pray to Master, and he would hear Master's voice in his mind. And I presume it was in his mind. I don't think he said he was speaking in the room. But Swami had to write by hand. And sometimes he said he actually had to say, "Please repeat that, sir, I missed a word." And then Master would repeat it. Master wasn't anywhere physical. After Swami wrote that book, Swami said afterwards, he said, I've always devoted my whole life to being in tune, being on the same wavelength, to be on the same vibration. That's what it means to be in tune with Master. He said, but now I can't tell where my own thoughts begin or end and Master's begin, because the entire world view, the entire way of understanding reality, he'd simply absorbed that of the Master. Now, I've heard this for years, and I've always, and later Swami said, just his consciousness, he couldn't tell where his consciousness began or ended, because he'd become so much a part of who the Master was. I mean, this is how St. Francis felt. This is how Mother Teresa of Calcutta felt. This is what happens, not because the personality takes you over. It's not the personality. The personality is just something they put on. Master said, when I incarnate, and just like the level that these souls live on, when it's time for me to incarnate, and Master has incarnated many times. He was asked once, has Jesus reincarnated? He said, someone with such compassion would have to have reincarnated many times, because they couldn't just come once and just sort of, well, I've done it, because there's others, one stray brother left behind, coming up, suddenly awakening and having that desire, and that desire to understand goes out like a beam into the universe. This absolute, a prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. Swami wrote that Festival of Light so that we would have these ideas coming back into us again and again. A prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. A ray of your light flashed out from infinity, burst downward through night skies of consciousness, and was born on earth for the redemption of mankind in human form. But where did that start? A prayer of love went up from earth. And that's your prayer, that's my prayer. Master went so far as to say that he would return again and again, 1 trillion times if necessary, as long as one disciple. He would come back for one disciple. It's very hard for us even to begin to comprehend that. So Swami's entire reality was he was here to serve Master, and he had multiple incarnations that he knew about, and many others, I'm sure he didn't bother to list them all, in which he'd come in exactly the same relationship, the next generation after the Master. And in several lifetimes he was his biological son, so his meeting of the Master was from conception. In this incarnation of Kriyananda and Yogananda, he came as a young man and only had 3.5 years, but that's all disciples of Jesus had in the story that we know. Jesus' life, he was 18 years in India, the quote lost years now, which everybody's talking about. It's not even an esoteric thing anymore, but Master declared it. 18 years. I said to Swami, sir, it looks to me like his real job was in India. He just kind of strolled over to the western side for a while to just finish the story, but the majority of his life, and he was a teacher there. He wasn't hiding in a cave. He was teaching, and that's why Christianity exists in India. Because after he died, Thomas went. Jesus told Thomas before Jesus died, your job is India. So as soon as Jesus died, Thomas went to India, went to the south and brought it up. But all of this drama is going on. So when Swami talked about his thoughts and his consciousness being the same as Master, it sounds very inaccessible to us. But one of the things that Swami Kriyananda was so brilliant at doing was he could take the principle that was expressed on a level that we couldn't comprehend, and he could bring it down to something that we ourselves know. And if you can see it in the tiny little bit of our own world, then you can understand, well, how far can this expand? And so I had a very small experience that I don't want to exaggerate in any way, but nonetheless it was meaningful. This third book that I'm working on, I'm talking too much now about working on it and not working on it enough. I'm trying to box myself in here. But it's all the rest of the notes, which in my case there's hundreds of notes, that I have to publish. I have to put in form that others can see it, because otherwise it's in those file cabinets and it's going to be a nightmare for someone after I die. And I wouldn't want your bad vibes reaching me wherever I am. But I'm looking at these notes. I started taking notes in 1972, 71. I arrived in 71. I might have started in 71, because very early Swami said, I want you to write about me, which caused me to absolutely just panic, total panic. But not yet, he said, which gave me a little space to breathe. But so it was always there. So I always had a notebook and I always had a pen. I was never with Swami without a notebook and a pen. And so I'm looking at all these notes from 50 years now. I mean, this is really a long time. And they're all familiar to me. I don't mean familiar in the sense, although sometimes I do, remembering where I was when I wrote it, if I wrote it down. But this is just, what I'm reading is the way things are. But I didn't know that before I knew him. I hoped to find out the way things are. I hoped to find out a way of life that would be meaningful to me, but I didn't have it. But what I wrote down always was what I thought was important. But I realized that my whole way of relating to life, it's all in those notes. It was acquired from experience, from it being presented by someone who understood. And so by no means, I definitely know where I end and Swami begins. I haven't come there. But you see how it happens. And in the same context, in one of those pieces of paper, Swami is right talking about the fact that he was saying, masters, he was talking about master. That's, of course, what he did a great deal. He said, masters, what it is to be a disciple is not to have memorized master's words. It's not to be able to quote those words. And he talked about a disciple of master who, when a visitor was coming and they were trying to talk about who master was, would sort of pick up a book and read sentences, words of master like that. Swami said, of course, those ideas are helpful. But he said, master, a great master, any great master, they're not words. It's a vibration of consciousness. And then Swami said, it's an entire understanding of life. It's just an understanding of how do we relate to one another? How do we relate to ourselves? How do we relate to the world around us? How do we relate to other people's suffering? What do we do about money? Anything there is. This is to be in tune, to be part of the path. Is not to sort of sit on the outside and open the book and say, well, this is what is supposed to happen. And now I'm actually going to remember that there was a reading today and I'm going to reference it. Those of you who know me well sometimes keep score to see if I ever get back to where I'm supposed to get back. But I'm going to, because Swami talks about, in there, he talks about, Jesus said it's not enough to be like the Pharisees. And then Swami points out that he multiple times said the Pharisees were about as low as you could get. So for him to say, be better than the Pharisees, is not like asking very much of us. So it has to be understood differently. The Pharisees, in other places it's presented, they just understand it from the outside. This is what I'm supposed to look like. This is what I'm supposed to wear. This is my costume. This is the vocabulary I use. This is how I walk. This is how I behave. This is what it looks like to be a spiritual person. But that's not what it looks like. Doesn't mean anything. It's the way we spontaneously respond to life. Just what is real, and where does happiness come from, and why am I born? What am I supposed to be doing here? And of course, the words help you, but they're just like a signpost. In the introduction, I'm pretty sure, it's to Whispers from Eternity. I think that's where it is. Master talks about penetrating through the doorway of ink and paper to reach the reality of what is being offered. He called that book Whispers from Eternity. That's an extraordinary title, that all the way. Now, coming back to the fact that Jesus left us a long time ago, he hung around for 40 days, but then none of us were there. Well, none of us with the names and the bodies we have on now. I believe probably many of us were there because we've been at this for a long time. You don't end up being interested in a path like this early. You have to go through an awful lot before you come to this point. But let's see, yes. And Swami left us. He left us 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was now, but it's long enough. And what I was starting to say back at the beginning, I represent Swamiji more than that. I mean, everything I offer is because he told me. It's as simple as that. He told me so. I tested it in my own life very vigorously, and now I don't remember that I learned it because it's just who I am until I start looking at these notes and I say, oh, look, that was the first time I heard that. That was the first time I heard that. Isn't that interesting? But when I'm when I have been more recently, and especially when I travel and I go places where I never met Swami at all, ever, I have to try to explain, why does it still matter? And that's, we don't question that about Jesus, but it's a very reasonable question. We don't question it about Jesus because so many people have told us it's true. We've begun to believe it's true. And there's so many examples of saints and masters, Saint Teresa of Avila, Mother Teresa of Calcutta more recently, Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Clare. It goes on and on and on like that. And Mother Mary keeps popping up all over the place. She is really busy. She's always she gets no rest, that woman. She's always, the prayer of love, she must hear it. Mother's compassionate heart. She's always coming back to talk to us through someone. But we believe that because it's been here for a long time. But Yogananda, Kriyananda, these are all a lot newer. So I had, and I would have to talk to people about this. It's like, is it still accessible? Is the prayer answered? If we pray to these masters, or who are we praying to, or what are we praying to? Swamiji, at a certain point, Nishala wrote a very good book. She interviewed a great many people who, this was like 20 years ago, maybe even longer. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a very good book. And she interviewed a lot of founding members of Ananda and in a very skillful way told their stories. Two of the people in there, people that you love and respect, whose names I won't mention, both of them had received assignments from Swamiji where it appeared as though he gave them the assignment and then just left them to figure it out for themselves. And both of them in the interview, in a somewhat humorous way, because, a person talks like that. So there I was standing on the doorstep and Swami just drove off and I had to, turn back and figure out how to do this. I was kicked out of Paradise in 1987 and asked to move here, with very little instruction. This is very little instruction. Sir, what do you want us to do? Oh, I don't know. He said, you're going to be the ones who are there. You tell me. Yeah, that was about it from the outside. And in all the years that we were here, when he was here, I think twice he gave us specific instruction. But I always knew what to do. Coming back to this book, in two of those stories, Swami read the book. It was a very good book. Both of those places, he called both those people. He said, I never left you alone. He said, my consciousness was always with you. My recollection is that he made them reprint the book. But I'm not 100% certain that that's true, because he felt it was such a misrepresentation. And later on he said, this is how I work with people, and this is what counts. This is about Swami, this is about Master, it's about any personification of the infinite. Swami said, first, for those who want to be in tune, and that is the first thing. You have to want. You have to want to change the way you approach life. If you're perfectly happy with the way everything is going, it's great. Swami said, when Swami would be asked by people, do I need a guru? He says, not if you don't think so. If you don't think you need a guru, no, actually you don't need one. But you might change your mind, if not in this incarnation, maybe in 100,000 later, when you begin to recognize that my own ideas are not the best, and maybe there's something more that I'm not seeing. So the first thing is for those who want to be in tune. And then Swami said, I project energy. With my consciousness, I project my consciousness. And if they want to receive it, and then he said, I project ideas. That's even what he said. I project thoughts, I project ideas. Where do you think your thoughts come from? They're constantly being projected from a greater reality than just us. If you want to be in tune, I project thoughts. And if you're in tune with the thought that's coming, he said, you will receive it. And if it really resonates with yourself, your karma, your way of doing things, he said, it will become your own. And after being part of this, the founding energy of this whole thing that we have in this part of the world, when we were dedicating our community, which was just a few years into it, we had this huge dedication on the green there, and Swamiji was there, and a lot of people came from other places because it was the first time we'd done anything like this. And I was there on the dais in front of the microphone, as I often am, and Swami was sitting a little behind me, and I was saying something. And, I'm a little bit of a slow learner, but I get it. I realized that in all the time, at that point, which has only been 3 years or so, I never didn't know what to do. And it doesn't mean that all my ideas were good. Some of my ideas were not good. Some of them were stupider, but some of them were really stupid. But there was a movement of energy. There was just, it wasn't necessary to pause. It's just like the energy was always moving. And in the most important ways, we always knew what to do. We just knew what to do. And all of a sudden, standing there, I had all the pictures of the masters were in big like that, and Swami was sitting in front of it, and it was like, oh my God, why did I ever think that it was me? I had wanted to be in tune. It's as simple as that, because a prayer of love goes up from earth and God responds. It's just like that. If you want to be in tune, the saints, the masters, Christ, Swami, all of them, they're all just, frankly, they have nothing else to do. It's their job. Sometimes, especially when I was much more active in meeting with the people in counseling and doing all kinds of things here, people would say to me, well, I didn't want to bother you. I would have called. Somebody gets in real trouble and I would have to search them out and what is going on? Can I help you? Well, I didn't want to bother you. I said, look, if nobody calls me, I have nothing to do. This is all that I do. There's no bother. But you see, the little tiny principle, think about that. If you really love someone and they need your help and they don't call you, Does that make you feel like they're very considerate? No, it breaks your heart. You're there to help, and they don't trust you enough to ask for your help. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. You have to want, you have to open yourself. You have to call with your whole heart. Prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. Just keep that in mind. Never forget it. Tattoo it on your heart. Okay, God bless you.
Let's have a few moments of silence.
Love is all I know, sun rays on the snow of a winter long, in darkness without song. Oh, my heart's a fire, burning on desire. Only you remain, and life again. Too long I did stray, flung lifetimes away, imagined you did not care. I know now your smile was mine all the while. I listened